if you act as this metaphoric speed camera in the classroom, the students actually know that if they raise their behavior to a particular point, then the speed camera is going to catch them. So my follow-up is a deterrent for the students to say, I'm going to get to this far, and if I continue it, then this is what's going to happen. Maybe there's going to be a call home, an email home. Maybe this teacher's going to have a chat to me later and get me to repeat my work during free time, whatever it is.
Welcome to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers, where we're all about bite-sized tips and simple strategies for bright and busy new teachers.
If you're in your first few years of your career and want to make the rollercoaster ride of teaching more fun, streamlined and stress-free, you're in the right place.
We're Ashleigh and Alisha, the dynamic duo from Rainbow Sky Creation, and we're excited to be your teacher mentors on the go. There are rainbows ahead, my friend.
And together, we're unstoppable. Let's get into today's episode.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Welcome back to Rainbow Skies for New Teachers. Ash here with a special guest, another Ash. Now, if you spend any time on social media, you are going to know this guest because he is awesome. He's known as the basketball classroom, a teacher of 11 years who focuses not only on academic success, but also, more importantly, personal and social success. His name is Ash Kermy, and I am thrilled and honored to have him on our podcast. I follow Ash on TikTok and on Instagram, and every time one of his videos comes up, I learn something new. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into classroom management and his philosophy on teaching, and I think you are absolutely going to love it. So here we are, our interview with Ash. Ash, you have been teaching for over a decade now. Can you tell us one thing that you did at the very start of your teaching career that you still do today?
Look, there's a lot of things taken care with planning, behavior management, lessons that I run. But to be honest, I'm going to dive into the foundations and say smiling and acknowledging the students, because honestly, that's a forgotten art. I see teachers, a student will come in late to the classroom and barely acknowledge the student. I like to just put a smile on my face, welcome the students in. That can be a small accomplishment, like a student completing a task, for example, and they bring it up to my desk and just smiling and acknowledging and saying, awesome job, and just letting them know that I see them and I see their effort, their accomplishment. I think that really goes far, and the kids are confident to come up to you, approach you, ask you questions. That demeanor has really assisted me in my teaching career, and something I'll never stop doing.
I think that's one reason why people are drawn to you and all the wonderful content that you do online, because you keep things so simple. And it is about those foundational things. I saw on Instagram the other day, I might just muck this up, but basically it was saying when a child walks in late into the classroom, this teacher always turns to them and says, I'm so glad you're here today. And it reminded me exactly of what you were just saying then, that instead of saying, why are you late? Have you got this? Quick, hurry, come on in. It's just acknowledging, I'm really glad you're a part of this classroom community and it's awesome that you're here.
That's right, yeah. And I've got a couple of students in the class that like to take a little venture off to 7-Eleven in the morning perhaps and get a frozen drink or something. And they might come in at 9:10 sometimes. And obviously it can be frustrating at times, but I like to say, look, good to see you guys. And then afterwards I'll have a bit of a quieter chat and talk to them about making sure we're here at 9:00 and all those sorts of things. But I just want to be first and foremost authentic to the kids, smile, let them know that I'm happy that they're here. And I think that goes a long way.
I agree 100%. All right. So we've talked about something that you have done all along in your teaching career, but can you tell us something that you used to do that you would not do now? I feel like the list is long for me. I don't know if you're the same.
Of course. I've narrowed it down to one particular thing, and I would say prioritizing curriculum over my behavior just based on the schedule that I've got running. That could be something as simple as my schedule saying that at 9:00 in the morning, I need to do spelling or reading or a group activity or something like that. And I'm prioritizing the curriculum to ensure that I get it complete, but not considering the dynamic of my class. So maybe it's on the late subject, maybe a student comes in late, maybe the class is a bit more hyped up in the morning. Perhaps I haven't got all my equipment ready. And if I dive into my curriculum too early, then I'm not delivering it at a successful rate, and the students can become a little bit lost with the content because I'm flustered, therefore they're flustered. And it's not delivered the way I'd like it to. I think what I used to do is really just focus on making sure that I got all my stuff done. The curriculum was really done on time. And what happened was I wasn't delivering it as successfully as I could. So what I did is flipped it and just prioritized the behavior. If a student comes in, there's students that come in late, if they come in a bit frazzled. I've had prac students before as well, and they've been ready to teach a lesson at 10:30, and I say to them, look, we're just going to dial back here. The kids aren't ready after assembly, sitting down for an hour and a half. They come back lined up pretty loud and come upstairs a bit loud. Yeah, let's dial it back. Let's take our time, go through the expectations. Doesn't matter that we start at 10:45. Let's do our lesson 15 minutes. After lunch, we'll dive into it again and deliver it as successfully as possible.
Yeah, it's about that flexibility point, isn't it? Being flexible. I know as a teacher, I was a bandit for always telling the students, like, hurry, quick. And it was because I was trying to get through that content and all the things that we needed to do as a part of our day. I know as a human being, I hate being hurried along. And you can never do things well, or you can never actually enjoy the process when you're always being hurried. So focusing more on those relationships, I can see, would actually get you through that curriculum because you're able to make those connections and beat to the tune of your students and what they need at that time.
That's it. And obviously, I can't represent a diagram through voice. If you think of a graph where if you're starting your content early and you're starting on this higher end of the graph, then you'll be ahead of those teachers
Mm.
that perhaps are prioritizing the behavior beforehand. But then it'll start to drop off and the other side will actually catch up because the person that's prioritized the behavior in the classroom, the students being ready, the teacher's preparation, having your worksheets ready, your mindset, your mind space as well. And that'll actually accelerate you up the hill quicker because you're ready to teach, the kids are ready to learn, you've got all the equipment ready, there's no rush, and you can get through it. And that's obviously a fine balance because as teachers, we've got demands and things that we need to get through in an allocated time. But what I've found is prioritizing how the class runs will help me meet those deadlines as well because I'm delivering everything in a smoother environment.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I've noticed about you is that you're not doing it in an airy-fairy way. You're still firm, but very fair. And the students really understand those expectations that you have upon them.
That's right. Yeah. And it becomes second nature to the kids and it's consistent. And sometimes the kids might slip up or might be a bit behind, and that's human nature. And it's just important as teachers, as you said, to be flexible and adapt accordingly.
So speaking of being consistent, something that I know that you are really consistent on is embedding real life learning into your lessons. For example, the Olympics and learning about decimals, or using Wordle in your classroom, or doing a measuring activity where the students are actually measuring things in real life. Why are you really big on embedding real life learning, and how do you get your ideas? Because I think a lot of teachers would think, wow, these are really creative. I want to know where he gets his inspo from.
Yeah. Yeah. But look, for context for listeners too, the decimal video that I shared recently was pretty popular. I think it eclipsed a few 100,000 views, lots of shares and stuff. And basically it was just around the Olympics. And I was watching the 100-meter men's final, got up at 4:30 in the morning, whatever it was, because I really wanted to watch it. And the times were very close. Obviously it had 9.82, 9.83 hundredths of a second. And they actually had to separate first and second with thousandths of a second. And I know that previously the kids, when I've taught decimals, it's been a tricky concept. So I only picked this up a few years into my teaching journey, but teaching decimals through a swimming race or an athletics race or something current is really engaging for the kids. So I guess to answer your question, why do I embed real life into my learning? It's because I feel optimal learning occurs when students are really listening, and listening, obviously, therefore, content needs to be thoughtful, succinct, engaging, contemporary. Those sorts of things allow students to really focus and listen and be engaged. So that's the purpose of why I do it. And in terms of just the ideas that I get, I know that analogies and students resonating with real life events can really help them build connections. And that's not just a fancy term, the building connections. That's something that as adults we do. And as kids and whatever phase of life we're in, making those connections can really help us understand particular concepts. So when I'm teaching various things, like, again, the decimals was one example, I found a real life event that was current, contemporary. I knew students were going to be interested in that sort of thing. And I'm not just saying to the class, all right, everybody, today we're learning decimals. This is 9.7, this is 9.78. I'm providing context as to why we need tenths, hundredths, and thousandths, and why not do it in an Olympic event of the highest standard.
Yeah, and it makes them realize that they're learning something for a reason. I think that's what the wonderful part is about embedding real life learning into the classroom is. It gives them that reasoning behind why they're learning it and how it's going to help them move through the world.
That's right. Yeah. And if kids can make connections, like I said, optimal learning, I feel, really occurs when students are listening. And you can deliver content to your class, but you don't have a full range of students fully paying attention if I guess your content isn't engaging and authentic and contemporary for the students as well. And you might be delivering content, but it might only be to 75% of the audience. So I guess in my mind, I'm trying to increase the probability of 28 students paying attention to me by making it engaging and authentic in real life and trying to increase that percentage to 100 as often as possible. And I do notice that whenever I'm relating things to real life, it's a real connection. And another one that I do is when I'm teaching writing, and I use a chocolate bar analogy, and I just talk about the fact that you can buy a dairy milk that might be 20 pieces, and you can buy a Woolies or Coles ones that's 100 pieces, and obviously it's not going to taste as good. And what I'm seeing people doing in their writing, and I'd say this to the kids, I see people doing in their writing is some people are focusing on this Woolworths chocolate bar where what they're doing is they're writing pages and they're really proud of it, and I'm proud of it too. And I really love that people are doing that. But what's happening is the chocolate actually doesn't taste as good, and your writing isn't actually engaging, and it's a bit of waffle. And I show examples on the TV, and I say, I really want it to be this Cadbury dairy milk. Like I want to dig into that. It's only 20 pieces, but your writing, I'd love to see this type of language feature and this type of sentence and this description. And that sort of analogy resonates with the kids again and allows me to engage them further and understand it on a different level. So I just find embedding real life is a key to learning, no matter what age we are.
I love that chocolate analogy. I'm going to be using that with my son later tonight because he's always like, how many pages was it? And I'm like, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. But that is a way better way to explain it.
That's what I say. And then I relate it to quality versus quantity. And it's a hit. So I just think it's really important to do those sorts of things as teachers. And it doesn't take a lot of extra thought too. Like a lot of teachers talk about content and I need more planning time. And what do I do here? I haven't got enough time to plan these lessons. If you think about real life situations and just take your time and really dial it back and think, okay, decimals, I can relate it to a race, or writing, I can relate it to this little chocolate bar because kids are writing too much, and just really thinking, then you can just turn it into a lesson in seconds and it makes a whole world of difference.
I feel like that is one of your superpowers though, so don't underestimate yourself.
No, I appreciate it.
One of my most favorite lessons that stands out in my mind, and this was many, many years ago, and I'm going to share how long ago it was through the story, but my students were learning, we were doing place value, and we were like expanding numbers and working out what their value was and all of those activities that you do during place value. And choosing a random number or rolling a dice to create a 6 or 7 digit number, it's interactive, but the number means nothing. So what I did was I went and got Twitter profiles of all the famous people that they really liked. So Twitter, you can see it was a long time ago now. And we wrote down how many followers they had. So then they had to write out their number and then they used the place value accordingly. And it was a really great lesson. The kids were so engaged because they wanted to know these famous people. They were able to compare the numbers, compare who had more followers. You could do that with some of your TikTok videos.
That's an amazing way. I love that representation.
Speaking of TikTok, let's move on and talk about your TikTok, which I feel like 5-10 years ago, we would not be saying you're a teacher TikToker with hundreds of thousands of followers, but you share amazing TikToks about teacher life. You share other people's content and then you give your own opinion on it, backing it up with your experience and your position, which I really love. So what's something that you feel that teachers are getting the wrong message about on social media when it comes to teaching and education?
Yeah, social media is an interesting thing because you've got a variety of platforms, a variety of opinions, a variety of backgrounds and educators from principals to school teachers to trainee teachers, all sharing their experience. I think the wrong approach would be to not pay attention to a variety of educators because you might get something new from a principal, a trainee teacher. I've certainly got that from prac teachers that I've had as well. And so it's a really good way to get your experiences out. But in saying that, obviously, there's also some messages on there that can be misconstrued. And one that I've noticed, and I wouldn't say it's a wrong thing, but I'm pretty big on the whole classroom management thing and really giving authentic advice. And one thing I know that helped me as a classroom teacher with regard to behavior was not putting too much emphasis on rewards and relationships, although they are imperative, because that's the foundation and the building block with your classroom management. But I do know that a lot of teachers portray band-aids for classroom management. So it could be, are you having trouble with your class? Let's put on teacher versus student on the whiteboard and you can do points or you can do this. Or have you seen my classroom warm and fuzzy animal sort of things where they say in a jar and I take one out, or have you done this? And those are absolutely amazing systems. I've used and currently still use those systems in my classroom. However, when we're delving into the root cause of managing a class, those are the messages where I see a lot of teachers, they're receiving that sort of advice, but what they don't realize is going to be a temporary band-aid. It may become stale after a week or two, and it's not going to address it's the whole problem of a student continually being disruptive and interrupting, or continually refusing work, or talking back, or not having their things out on time. Those sorts of things are all what might fix it for a short amount of time. But I think what it comes down to is just understanding that there is a process with behavior and it's not a quick fix. And that's okay. I want teachers to understand that classroom management isn't a quick fix. It's not something you can just patch up real quick. It's really something you've got to delve into, and it's not going to be an overnight thing that you can just look up a video for and say, if I implement this system, then I can fix what's going on in my classroom. I just like to portray on my channel the fact that classroom management is layered and it takes time. Along with your positive relationships and your reward system, it also comes down to knowing your students, planning, your preparation, all the intangibles that teachers don't actually see that are a little bit behind the scenes, which I actually spoke about when I was speaking at the National Education Summit in Brisbane recently.
Yeah, congratulations on that too. What a cool achievement.
No, thank you.
But you're right. I think we often go for those surface level ideas. And we've got to remember too, social media, you're getting a very small glimpse into something. Someone may be giving a 30-second video or one photograph. So it's just a real snapshot. Things go deeper than that. And we've got to remember that we do need to go a little bit deeper. And also, we don't have solutions to every single problem. I know I've taught classes, and one year I thought I was the best teacher in the world. I was just totally rocking it. The next year, I thought I was the world's worst teacher. I just could not handle the students or a student in my class for whatever reason. So I guess as teachers, we need a toolbox and we need places to go and ideas to curate our classroom management as we're going along. There's just not one size fits all. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. One size does not fit all. And I guess the reason that I like to, speak on this subject very often, if you listen to any of my podcasts, I speak about this over and over. It's because, like I said at the start of this clip, if your classroom management isn't down, your curriculum isn't getting delivered. And I've been a part of classrooms myself, being 11 years. Like, I can't say my first classroom ran as smoothly as I would have liked it. It did. But at times I know that curriculum wasn't delivered because there were students talking when I was, or because I didn't have things ready myself. And I think those classrooms that are a bit calmer, a bit smoother, you got a firm but fair approach, and the kids understand your expectations, your curriculum therefore gets delivered successfully, like I was saying before. And that's really paramount. That's the first thing I'm considering as an educator.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of classroom management, you teach grade 5. I don't think we have said that yet. So a little bit older students. What are some of your classroom management tips to keep your grade 5s on track? I know we've spoken a little bit throughout it, but I'd love just to hear a bit of a summary.
Yeah, of course. I guess for context, I've taught mainly grades 3 to 6. I've done contracts for lower grades and relief days and PE. I've taught prep to 7. So I've taught a wide range of abilities, but most of my experience is with 4, 5, 6. And I apply the same principles regardless of the grade, to be honest. Obviously, prep, I'm going to do completely different to grade 6, but at the same time, I can still do a little hand-on-heads game or Simon Says or something like that with a prep and a grade 6 kid. I can still use a YouTube video to engage a prep and a grade 6 student. It's the same sorts of principles, but I narrowed it down to a top 3, like I said, when I was speaking in Brisbane, because there was a lot of things that I wanted to portray, but I only had a 30-minute segment. And I guess on the podcast, I want to be speaking for hours on end. So I guess my main 3 are, my first one would be pre-correcting and being prepared. So knowing what's going to happen before it actually happens. Therefore, you can prevent that behavior from occurring in the first place. So what I like to do is really dive deep and think, what may happen in this activity that I can prevent? Therefore, I won't have to manage this if it does happen. So the example that I used was playing some sort of game with equivalent fractions where students roll a dice, they verse a partner. If one student rolls a 1 and a 6, they'd highlight 1/6 on their equivalent fraction chart, and the other student rolls a 2 and a 4, and that's obviously 2 out of 4, whichever has the higher fraction wins. So I'm thinking of all these things as I'm introducing this game, and I'm thinking, if I hand this activity out, there's going to be things happen. Maybe a student says, I want to go first. No, I want to go first. And it creates an argument. So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do to reduce that argument from happening? I'm going to model and show them we can play scissors, paper, rock, and it's going to take us 5 seconds. And again, that's very, nuanced, because you may not have a kid in your class that's going to argue about who goes first. But I'm just thinking of the possibility of that happening. So I'm thinking of all the possibilities. Then I'm thinking, okay, they're going to roll dice. Maybe a student's going to roll a dice across the classroom. Maybe a student's going to lose this dice under the cabinet. What's that going to create? Oh, can you come here and help me find the dice? Can you help me do this? Oh, I can't find it. Now I can't play the game. Can I borrow your dice? Now I can't find any. It just creates this big thing. Again, that may not happen, but I'm thinking of the possibility of it happening. So what am I going to do? I will teach the students that we're going to roll the dice no more than an arm's length away. And I want to make sure that I model it and I practice it with the kids. So I'm really thinking about being prepared with all my lessons. Once I've designed one, I'm thinking, okay, I've got my lesson ready. What could happen? It could be maybe my students are going to be sitting too long. It could be maybe this dice is going to get rolled too far. Whatever the situation is, I'm trying to restrict that from happening. Therefore, the behavior isn't there to manage in the first place.
As you were saying that, one thing that my husband and I have 3 kids. And often we see mums who've been mums for a really long time and they do something. And my husband just looks at me and goes, oh, that is experience right there. Like they have got the experience and that is why they did that. That led to this amazing outcome. And that's when you were talking then, I was like, oh, that's just teacher experience, isn't it? Knowing that they could roll the dice and they go underneath the cabinet, or like they could throw the dice across the room. You don't know. Lots of things can happen.
That's it. And yeah, I'm even thinking of an example of PE, for example. If I have my tennis balls or whatever at the spot ready for the students and I send them straight over, of course, the preps and ones are going to want to pick it up and throw it. So I'm going to have maybe a lid on the thing, or perhaps I'm going to say that the group that I see sitting down next to them and not touching, all these things I'm thinking this is going to restrict maybe this student from picking it up and throwing it at someone. This is going to restrict maybe a student bouncing when I'm trying to talk. I'm always thinking what could happen. And like you said, it does definitely come from experience as well. And if we use that experience, but also a little bit of prediction, we're having our lessons scheduled and we're thinking what could happen, and just spending an extra couple of minutes, again, it may create a little bit of extra work for you, but in the moment of the lesson, it's going to then in turn create less work for you.
Yeah. So your first tip is prevention over cure, basically. Prevent the behaviors from happening.
That's the first one. Yeah, that's it. Look, number 2, I'm going to say following up. I guess deterring a student from repeating that behavior. An analogy I like to use is a speed camera. And if you're driving along the road, obviously you see your speedo, the speed limit says 70. You may want to speed off to go get home after a long day at work or whatever it is. But the fact that the speed camera is there deters you from putting your foot down further. And obviously the risk of injury and being dangerous is another one. But I'm just talking specifically on the fact that the speed camera is a deterrent and you know that it could be there in the vicinity of where you're driving. And that sort of principle you can apply with your kids as well. If you act as this metaphoric speed camera in the classroom, the students actually know that if they raise their behavior to a particular point, then the speed camera is going to catch them. So my follow-up is a deterrent for the students to say, I'm going to get to this far. And if I continue it, then this is what's going to happen. Maybe there's going to be a call home, an email home. Maybe this teacher's going to have a chat to me later and get me to repeat my work during free time, whatever it is. My follow-up occurs before, during, and after lessons. It's not follow-up sounds like after because the word follow, but it really occurs on 3 levels. And obviously after your lesson, following up with the student, maybe saying, what could we have done in this situation? I saw you do this and this. Do I need to send an email home depending on the severity of the behavior? Then before your lesson, the next one, you revise that. And you say, yesterday we had this chat after our lesson. I can see this in our book. Mum sent me an email back. She said that she was pleased or displeased with what happened. And then during my lesson as well, I'm going to the student and saying, I noticed that you've fixed this, or I noticed that this is actually occurring again. And I'd really like you to be thinking about this. And just following up with the student and them being aware that you're going to do something about it acts as a deterrent for them to, like I said, go up that hill and put their foot down on the speed, because they know that they should probably stop at 60 because that's the speed limit. If they go over, something's going to happen.
Yeah, you're that speed camera holding them accountable too. And as teachers, sometimes we can just forget and move on, and we've got so many more things to do, but you're holding them accountable and having that place for them in order to help them.
That's right. Yeah. Like I said, I've noticed that helps because in the first couple of weeks at school, the kids are going to push my boundaries, and that may happen for a term, 2 terms. I'm not going to put a length of time on it, but at least this year, for the first couple of weeks, I had a few students push the boundaries, see what they can get away with. And once I showed them this is what occurs following that behavior choice, then I simply didn't have to raise a voice. I can just give a look. I can say, look, we know what occurs. And they stop themselves because they know that I'm going to do something about it and follow it up.
Yeah. For sure. That goes back to that consistency point that we spoke about earlier too. Okay, what's your number 3 tip?
Yeah, finally, I guess just differentiation. You've got a variety of different abilities in your classroom, and that needs to be, I guess, considered. So you've got students that may be disengaged with the task and don't understand it. Therefore, they're going to get chatty, disruptive, and get bored. And therefore, you've got students, why is my class being so loud, chatty, disruptive? This student's always off task. And I'm trying to, again, use that restricting type of practice of saying, I want this to be prevented as much as possible. So I use a thumbs scale in my classroom where at the end of a particular lesson, I might say, all right, show me how you're feeling. And it's not public. It might just be to me or it might just be subtle. 2 thumbs if you understand it fully, 1 thumb if you feel like you get it, sideways thumb if you feel like you get it, but maybe you need a little bit of help, and red thumb would mean you don't understand it. And by doing that, I can assign roles, and my red thumb people can go work with the double thumb people who fully understand it. They can be peer tutors. Rather than me saying, here's a worksheet, red thumb people, I want you to try this. Maybe the red thumb people can come work with me. Maybe the green thumb people, they're just a little bit behind on this content, so they can work with the double thumb people. So I'm assigning roles in the classroom, differentiating. Obviously, that's just one example. But by doing that and assigning roles, every student knows what their capability is. And I have a classroom culture of doesn't matter where you are in the learning process. So that needs to be built first, because so the students understand that everyone works at different levels. But by doing that, you have less off-task behavior because the blues are helping the reds are getting assistance where they need it. And you've just got everyone working in coherence, I suppose.
I really like that example of differentiation. I was writing something about differentiation just earlier today. And I think sometimes we get so caught up as teachers that it's every group is doing a different task and you have 6 groups and everyone's doing something different, which is like totally overwhelming, and even to organize that for all your different lessons. But that's a really good way to show that differentiation, there's so many different ways to do it. And one way is tapping into your class community.
Of course, that's 100% right. And it builds teamwork, it builds team spirit, it builds students not just picking their friends to go work with and like having a bit of variety in their day and variety in people they work with. They can have a bit of choice and autonomy if they're going to work in a group or partners, and I give them a bit of flexibility. And if they're not doing it properly, I call them back. We have a chat together and go through it again. But like I said, I'm just trying to restrict the fact that I know that there's some students that are going to understand it quicker than others. And I'm trying to restrict the fact that those students that may not understand it or may find it easy might display more behavior than others because they're bored or disengaged. So I'm really just trying to keep everyone busy, everyone on task, everyone has a role, everyone's working with somebody or finding someone to help, and it keeps students engaged rather than saying it's time to do a worksheet for 25 minutes, go, and then after you're done, just do some coloring, because then the students just may not stick it out.
That was wonderful. I've got one last question for you before we wrap up our podcast today. If you want your TikTok audience to know one thing about you as an educator, what would that one thing be?
I want people to know that as an educator, I'm still learning too, as are educators of 20 years, 25 years, 3 years, pre-service teachers, because there is no end point. And that's a bit of a cliche, but it's really a fact of the matter. Teachers are always evolving and learning. I don't claim to have all the knowledge in the world and all the questions and the answers in the world. And when pre-service teachers, when I host them, I like to tell them and say, look, I'm going to learn from you as well. And I want you to understand that there's going to be some lessons that I conduct where maybe the students are a little bit off task, or maybe the students are, I could have planned it better. And I'm going to let you know, because that's part of teaching. And I'm always refining and adapting my practice and amending accordingly. So athletes win gold medals and sporting legends win championships, and they still refine. They don't become complacent. They change their rosters around. And I guess that's another analogy I like to use in my life, watching a lot of sport. As a teacher, I've noticed that I adapt my practice every year that I'm teaching, and it helps because I always think about what can I fix to make it better. And I'm in the process of doing that daily, yearly, and a learning process is a beautiful thing. And that's what every teacher should understand, that even though despite your experience, everyone's still on a journey, and we shouldn't think that there's an end point.
That's one of the most exciting parts about teaching, I think. Well, Ash, thank you so much for your time. You have shared so many fantastic ideas that I know our listeners will really appreciate. I think it was a slam dunk of a podcast. Do you see what I did there?
Oh, I see what you did there.
Thank
like
you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Definitely check out Rainbow Skies as well for listeners. It's just such an amazing channel. Always variety and constant uploads and professionalism.
Amazing. You know what? One thing we didn't say how people can find you on social media.
Yeah.
Quick, give yourself a little plug.
Actually, my last name's pretty exclusive, so it's pretty easy to find. But my social media is Mr. Kermy's Classroom, CURMI, and on TikTok and Instagram. And I've got articles and podcasts on the web as well. So lots of things.
Amazing. We'll make sure that those links go in the show notes. Thanks again.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
When I found out I was interviewing Ash, I just wanted to come up with a whole heap of basketball puns to use throughout the episode. And I was driving along thinking about them all. And then I thought, no, that's lame. So I didn't do it. So that is why I just threw that last little joke in at the end there. And if you're unsure why I said that joke about basketball and it being a slam dunk of an interview, Ash loves basketball. And if you follow him on social media, that is something that definitely stands out amongst his amazing passion for teaching and his very calm and strategic way he goes about teaching his students. I really love the way that he embeds real life learning and engages his students in that. Every time one of his videos pop up on my TikTok feed, which is almost every day because I absolutely love TikTok, I'm always learning something new. And that is one of the most wonderful things about social media. As Ash said, we're getting to share and learn from each other and see different perspectives and learn things that we may never have thought of ourselves or seen in our own schools. So thank you so much to Ash for sharing all of that. Now, while we are sharing, I went to leave a review on somebody's podcast today. And you know what? It took me a minute or two to remember how to do it. So I thought I would give you a little reminder. If you've been wanting to write us a review, if you've been wanting to rate the podcast, if you're an Apple podcast, all you need to do is go to our show. So click on Rainbow Skies for New Teachers. Scroll all the way down and it will show you the latest episodes. And then at the bottom, it'll have a place to rate the podcast and also leave a review. And if you do, we would be forever grateful. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. There are rainbows ahead, and together we're unstoppable.